And we're live with our 103rd episode of Absolute AppSec. I'm Ken Johnson at CK Tricky on Twitter, joined by my co-host Seth Law at Seth Law on Twitter. Seth, say hi.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back once again. We're excited to have Oded with us today to discuss some secrets management and how we actually handle those and AKEYLESS. We'll get into that shortly. We'll do full introductions here as well. But first, we wanted to make sure that everyone knew about a Midsummer Nights Con, which will be next week. I think it's next Monday on the 27th of July. Runs from 6 p.m. to about 10 p.m. Eastern time. And we're really excited about it. We're really excited about the speaker lineup. Includes Cory Doctorow, some lawyers from the EFF. We'll have a panel there. Logical, Stephen Edwards, InfoSec Anon, or however she says it now. I can't remember, Heather. Realistically, it's going to be a really great conference. We've got a couple people that have been on the podcast before, including Stephen and Neil and Jerry Gamblin. So you should join us. It'll be short and sweet, but it should be a fun way to get together. Outside of that, we also have Black Hat training coming up. We're going to be teaching Next Level Bug Hunting Code Edition, which is a spin on our Excellent Adventures in Code review. So how to identify security vulnerabilities and exploits in code, and how we go about that as security professionals. We'll teach you the whole process and everything that it takes for us on a day-to-day basis to identify that. Outside of that, I don't think we've got anything else that is announcement worthy right now. Ken, was there anything else that you had?
No, but I'm going to post the link here in a second to our training for Black Hat so that people can be able to check that out. But no, I didn't have anything else other than to introduce the man of the hour, yes. Oded from
hi again.
Hi. From Oded Hareven.
Hareven, go for it.
Hareven.
From AKEYLESS. He's a CEO and founder. And I basically, is actually Seth, it was just like, it was you and I, right? Just like a day or two ago, somebody, or was it over the weekend, somebody was asking about like secrets management to us or something like that. I think it was over the weekend, actually. Somebody was asking about it. And it's just funny because this is the conversation we always have is like, how do I do secrets management securely? And it's very, very confusing for a lot of people. And anyways, so I had happened to come across this technology and get introduced to these fine folks and figured, maybe have them on the podcast. And they said yes, and I'm super happy about it. And so yeah, we're going to learn more about the technology, about Oded, and just basically get into it. So anything before we do that, Seth?
Oh, no, I was going to say, this is definitely one of the, this is a very common issue that we see across the board, right? Like, I can't tell you how many reports I've written when I'm doing a secure code review where I'm like, guys, you can't put your AWS key in your GitHub instance, right? And I know like GitHub tags that now, but I still see it pop up from time to time, and it may not necessarily be AWS keys anymore, but at the very least, right, database passwords have always been an issue, right? Like those database strings that are sitting in the settings files or in web.config or whatever, settings file your framework happens to use. It's very common in my space. I know, Ken, you guys have probably solved that a little bit on your side better, but most small and medium-sized companies struggle with this because the developers have so much trust and the security team doesn't necessarily have a purview into what they're doing with those secrets and how they're connecting to other systems. So it'll be a good discussion. And the question that popped up was from someone that had been in one of our courses. And it was honestly, what's the recommended way for an application to store passwords that aren't used for logging into, but for accessing other things like APIs, right? So like, yeah, how do we store passwords, not for our users, but for when we want to access things? And I think that's specifically what AKEYLESS is about. And I know there's other technologies that are out there that solve problems. And we can talk about how AKEYLESS compares to like AWS Secrets Manager, right? Like that'd be an interesting discussion to have, because that is a technology that I know people are familiar with, and they do have a tendency to use it. So, so first off, right, like Oded, let's have you introduce yourself, right? Like you're the founder of AKEYLESS, is that correct?
Co-founder.
Co-founder.
This is important. We're a group. We have 3 founders here that founded the company, but we're a great team of management and R&D team and product and marketing. So it's a teamwork, as you know.
Cool. And so before we get to AKEYLESS, let's talk about your background a little bit. Like what led you to that point? Like you're in the security space now. Have you always been in the security space, or how did you get involved?
Well, that's a great question. I think that initially,
did we?
Maybe accidentally, I think. Well, it was back where I started in the Israeli Defense Forces, started my way. It was, believe it or not, at 2001. As you know, as my military duty. By the way, can you hear me right?
Yeah. Yep. You're coming across.
Oh yeah, there was lag for just a second, but you're fine now.
Can you hear us?
Oh.
Okay.
Did we can hear you. On?
Okay. Could
Uh-oh. All right. Well, I'll wait for him to rejoin. Let me go over here. Oh, while we're talking about stuff we may or may not. Oh, never mind. He's back. So
okay.
I have one thing to mention that we forgot to mention, but that's cool.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry for that. I have no idea what happened.
Oh no, we could hear you just fine. So.
Okay. So back in 2001, I started my way as in the programming course in the Israeli Defense Forces, and I was also a lecturer for. I stayed there to teach others to how to program, how to code. Back then, C++, C, very, the fundamentals of programming, and I found that fascinating. And I was kind of attracted to 2 things. One was communication, and the other one was it's communication and networking, and also the other part of infrastructure. So both of them, as you know, in the cybersecurity world, that was back then most of security. Lots of, there was some people that were starting to talk about application security back in 2000, but still it was not widespread. Application security is having great time in the last few years, with vulnerabilities in code and in the CI/CD testing, and so these days, in the last few years, that's a great place for application security. Anyway, so I started from infrastructure, and my first project was identity and access management. And we started with a product by a vendor that I won't reveal the name with your, if I may. And it turns out to be not a very good product that we have wanted to implement inside the Israeli Defense Forces. And pretty soon we understood that we need to code it on our own. And that was the beginning of my career with cybersecurity, to program identity and access management system. And with time, as time evolved, and I had the privilege to touch many types of information security infrastructure, to include endpoint security and SIEM/SOC and antivirus and PKI, and a lot of hardening and access management and SSO and all of those. So that's the core of where I come from: infrastructure and information security, and this is how I got into that world. And not to mention like 4 years before AKEYLESS, where I stopped with cyber for 4 years. So besides that, I've been with cybersecurity all that long.
Wow, that's a long time in this field. I mean, I think like a lot of people I know did. Seth, when did you start?
I can neither confirm nor deny that I was also doing stuff in 2001. But mine was more on the Java side at that point. Okay. Yeah, like so that's what I was going to ask but it sounds like it was C++ where you started in there, and then I moved over to the pen testing space in 2004, 2005. And went more of the kind of that consulting route until I made my way back to application security, because there was no application security at the time. It was all just, but exactly what you're saying, right? Like we have a lot of power to change things because we understand. And then I love to hear, okay, there's other people that were in the space back then that did programming and are still in the space, right? So
what were the issues with the product that you didn't like?
Well, back then, wow.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure there were a lot of things, but yeah.
Identity management. Well, those were the years where identity management kind of that was the major first wave of identity management back in the end of 90s, the beginning of 2000s, where infrastructure guys understood that, hey, what's happening? We have lots of users and we don't have a comprehensive workflow to unite all of those. But back then, there was workflows were very bad. Workflows products were very bad. A lot of polling and queues that were stuck. A lot of LDAP engines, LDAP databases that back then were, there were quite a few that were very good, but all the rest were I don't want to say shitty, but it weren't that.
You can, yeah, you can. It's our podcast. Go for it.
Yeah. Okay, no problem. And there was especially something in particular that I remember that we had to have some exits, some program exits, in order to enhance the product. And that the only option that we could have done it was using a C++ DLL on Windows. Oh, wow. And that was like not something that you could not have done. What's happening? Everything's okay?
Sorry,
we're okay.
I accidentally hit a wrong button.
Okay, no problem. That's basically the experience with SDK C++ on DLLs back then. So pressing wrong buttons and hoping that it will work. But right now I'm here alone.
You're still, we're still here. We were just highlighting you.
Okay, no problem. So anyway, that was a shitty thing. Lots of memory leaks and dumps, and it didn't went good. So we understood that we need to do so much enhancements that we should have just go back and have it to build it from the ground zero. Up and have it within, using .NET and any other technologies that were back then that we were using, and we took 4 weeks. That was my basically the first startup experience inside the Army, to take 4 weeks and to meet a deadline that was very important back then, and we were able to meet that. We didn't sleep for lots of pizzas and other cool stories that most of us have and still have, and this is how we've done it. We just built it, and it was great experience. But you know what, Seth, you've reminded me with the application security and penetration testing. I must share with you, back then 2004, the WebGoat, the beginning of the versions of WebGoat, and trying to hack things, and the easy back then, the SQL injections and cross-site scripting, and I was like, wow, I can do this and I can do that, and yeah, I've had a great experience with building for a short period of time, for 1 year, some architect and consultant team. It was very small at the beginning, to start consulting projects within the Army about how they need to do their security. And I actually remember how we really wanted them to go into the application security world. And again, back then, it was like talking with walls. It was so hard.
Yeah, and I was going to say on the identity management side, right? Like, this was what you're talking about, the period that you were talking about, identity and access management was a huge thing. And I remember like my first, security job at the bank, they were trying to solve it, like bringing in all these vendors, and no one had any idea what they were doing, right? Like they're back-ending, and I still see this. I will walk into clients and they're like, I'm like, okay, so who's your identity provider? And they're like, oh, it's our mainframe. And I'm like, it's your mainframe, right? Like, is this 2004, right? Like, but
well,
that's exactly what they've done, is because they implemented it and they can't get away from it. Yeah.
In a way, it is a mainframe, to have an SSO project, that's your mainframe. But so I understand what they're saying that. But I totally get it. We're talking back then at the beginning of 2000, where SSO, people were starting to talk about it. And the beginning of XAML, not to mention OpenID, right? So with identity management, the big word was about provisioning. Today, when we say provisioning, that's a completely different concept, right? Of provisioning your containers, provisioning the production environment, and that's such a much sexy word and more suitable to these days. But back then, you had to have some provisioning engine to provision accounts to any LDAP, Active Directory, or whatever shitty novel that you're using, or any, whatever that what was back then. And so I actually had a very recent thought about it, how things evolve in terms of how great things are with plugins and things that are much more standardized. And today with XAML and OpenID, you're just using, some links and you're connecting with like what was back then heavy to configure. Today you can configure Okta and any similar applications very easily. And instead of provision your identities, you're basically kind of having the permission to look at an external identity provider. And that's a great move that we've done in the last 10 or 15 years.
Yeah. I think about some of the IDPs that are out there, and as we started into that space, exactly what you were saying, it was all LDAP backends, and we were trying to wrap all this and figure out how SSO was to work as SAML and OpenID came out, and it was a difficult, it was a painful multi-year process for a lot of these large organizations. And nowadays it's like, oh, all you have to do is import this plugin into Okta, and here's the webhook, and
how great it is, right?
Yeah.
How great this is. And you know what? There's a very interesting trend, by the way. We say that history comes back. I don't know. There's a phrase in Hebrew that says that history repeats itself.
Yes.
So and I see the same, with back then in Active Directory, and you still see a lot of organizations that work with Active Directory. But the cloud brought so much of Linux, right, to the world. And suddenly what you used to have such a comfort zone with managing your Windows servers within a corporate large enterprise environment, and suddenly you're getting, again, most of your servers with containers and Kubernetes and so on, you're getting Linux a lot within your environment, and suddenly you don't have a domain to manage them.
Yeah.
So the history repeats itself with what we thought that we've had a solution with Active Directory domain, but suddenly you're getting a new problem, which is kind of the same old problem, but today it's with SSH keys once again. Yeah. And you're swamped with those SSH keys, and how do I manage them? And there's the easy solution of interconnecting your Linux with an LDAP repository, but it's not secured enough, and there's all kind of other things there. But you see trends that comes back, and again, identity management problem and privileged access management problem with the DevOps tools, right? Chef, Puppet, Ansible, and kubectl, kubectl, or whatever you call it. I saw that there's all kind of ways to call it, and SSH access, and all of those tools suddenly they're not getting a lot of good responses or good solutions from the old days legacy identity management solutions, not to mention the old days and old solutions of privileged access management.
Okay.
So there are great new opportunities with the new environments and the new tools of DevOps, and the new opportunities with the cloud. that provides that makes basically a great gap where secrets management is entering into that field. And I'm mentioning human to machine and not just machine to machine, right? Secrets management as a generic term. Most times I meet that term where people mostly say that it's machine to machine. You know, how do I manage my API keys and secrets within my code? How does my code authenticate to the secrets management system in order to fetch secrets? And my Kubernetes cluster, how do they protect secrets? Is it using Kubernetes secrets or an external secret management solution? And so all kind of those questions. But when you think of it, secrets management is about any type of secret, right? API keys and passwords and encryption keys also. And if you're looking on the leaders of this field or in secrets management and the innovative solutions in that realm, basically you tend to see that when you are analyzing it from the eyes of the IT DevOps, SRE eyes, all of them together, the security architect and the CISO that looks on the security problems, basically it's the same technology of the ability to encrypt very important objects that are being made in order to authenticate and authorize. And suddenly password management for humans and privileged access management becomes very close to that.
Yeah.
So imagine that we could have had an all-in-one solution for all of those problems. I don't want to take the end and the punchline, but eventually this is what we're going. This is where we're going. This is what AKEYLESS Vault is all about. You talk about the secrets management problem from a comprehensive view, where we look at this many secrets types within the organization and say, okay, what's the use case for that and what's the use case for that? Either it's an encryption key that is being used by an application, or sometimes what about the SSH key that is being used by the DevOps engineer? How do we protect that? Because it's a big hassle and a great vulnerability.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like an SSH key to get to like EC2 instance or something like that, for instance, just whatever it may be. I mean, one thing I liked about AKEYLESS when we were talking about the technology was specifically the zero knowledge aspect of it. And I was hoping you guys could talk a little bit about that. But the other thing I liked was your, I don't know why this is the way it is, Seth, but we've talked about on the podcast before with security vendors who won't put pricing on their page. Like they create a product, but won't put price. And, you know, like AKEYLESS actually has the pricing on there. But back to the technology aspect of it, I did like the zero knowledge aspect so that I don't have to trust that. Like it reminded me kind of like 1Password, how they don't actually ever know your like what the value is of whatever you're storing securely. So there's like with them, there's like a couple different keys, and I think you keep like the master key on your end, and then so it's basically the concept of that whole like zero knowledge on your end of our secrets essentially is like what I really did like and was interesting, like very interesting.
Mm-hmm. Oh, well, thank you for that. So in order to explain the zero knowledge or the zero trust encryption, as we call it, that basically means that we can manage secrets and keys for our customers and by the same time, we don't have access to those encryption keys and we don't have access to those secrets. That's the secret sauce of our secrets management, especially when we provide it as a service. So in order to talk about this, maybe 2 sentences about where we come from and where we started. So our story begins with our beloved CTO, Rafael. When he was working a few years ago in a large fintech, American fintech company in the cryptography and the security R&D center here in Israel, where he saw the major hassle of managing encryption keys and secrets on a very large scale, and the amount of resources that they had to invest in order to provide keys and secrets management to all of their internal projects. So after quitting the company, he thought about how can I solve it much better. And he was lucky enough to think about an innovative and patented technology that we call DFC, distributed fragments cryptography, that in short allows us to perform cryptographic operations using fragments of encryption keys that are spread in different regions, in different cloud providers, okay? And when we perform the cryptographic operations, we never need to combine those fragments, okay? That's a complete opposite of what you might have been familiar with Shamir secret sharing for that sense, okay? That with Shamir secret sharing, you're creating a whole key, then you're splitting it, and then when you need to use it, you need to combine it once again. And this is talking about security. This is where a malicious attacker can gain access and grab your key. And when your key is exposed, the game is over. So what we have invented, basically, in our CTO invented, is the way to, again, perform cryptographic operations using fragments without ever combining them. I know it sounds impossible, but this is how it works. And by the way, we use completely standard cryptography. Okay, it's all standard cryptography, and this is why we were very fast to get NIST FIPS 140-2, high level of cryptography, because it's all standard. But the innovative part here is about managing those fragments. So after we talked about this, then this is the time where we can talk about zero knowledge or zero trust encryption, as we call it. So first of all, what's the problem? The problem is, how can you manage encryption keys within cloud environments? Okay, basically you need to share your encryption keys with your cloud provider. Okay, that's the most basic part. And of course, when you want to manage also secrets, okay, when you wish to let's say manage your secrets within AKEYLESS, then how can you trust AKEYLESS? So we have leveraged, we have used our ability to perform those operations of encryption without combining those fragments, and saying one of the fragments will be created and stored locally on the customer environment. Okay, now locally it can be on their VPC, on their on-prem, whatever they wish, on their internal perimeter where we, AKEYLESS, don't have access to. So now you get, let's say, for the sake of example, you have 3 fragments that are being managed by AKEYLESS on different 3 regions, okay? They are not connected with each other. They're not communicating with each other. They're not even aware of each other. And they're all that time, they're constantly refreshed on their mathematical values. So it's very hard. You need to attack them simultaneously. Plus, there's another fragment that is stored on the customer side. So AKEYLESS doesn't have all of the fragments of the key, right? We don't have it. We only have several percentage of that. And because we're using standard cryptography, 99% of the fragments equal to 0% of the key. That's the beauty of it. So if someone either is trying to steal those keys from us, or Cloud Act, like a federal warrant or whatever, they're trying to attack our system, we don't have all the key. It's harmless in that way. And so this is how we provide our customers the ability to keep their exclusive ownership on their keys and secrets. We cannot decrypt their secrets. That's basically the story of it.
Cool. So
Awesome.
So basically that, like, their portion of the key ends up kind of being their master secret, right? Like that's what it takes to decrypt those values, is something along those lines.
This is great point what you've just mentioned, because that fourth element, and by the way, we're agnostic to the number of the fragments. That fourth element that we're now mentioning, or it's a sexy term to say fifth element, but so that's the fourth element, the golden piece here. It's not a salt. It's not a password. Okay, it's not an authentication. It's a real fragment of the key. Now, what's very great about it, that if someone is hacking to the customer environment and somehow is being able to grab that customer fragment because they have only that fragment, nothing happens.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not that you have one fragment that is more important than the others. The main target, or the main use of that customer fragment is basically to protect the customer from us, not from malicious attackers. Okay, for malicious attackers, the whole model is safe and constantly refreshed between those fragments. By the way, just to mention, those fragments are being stored in node environments, which are in a multiple in availability, different availability zones within multiple regions. So everything is replicated between regions. That's a great thing, by the way, that we are so happy to work with the cloud with such a technology, because it suits, it works well. Because when you have an encryption key as whole, okay, you never want to replicate it. That's the whole thing about encryption keys, right? You want to have
Yep.
one encryption key, and you don't want anyone to have a replication of it. But suddenly, when you're using such a great model where you're working with fragments of keys, then you can even do much greater things with having much higher resiliency and much higher availability for your entire key management system infrastructure. So suddenly we can be multi-region available. So if one region is down, we're still running. If one cloud provider is down, we're still running. Okay, that's part of it.
Cool.
How do they interface? Is it so if I wanted to do this in my application, is there a library to include, or do I make like API calls manually, or how does it all?
Lots of it. We're managing, basically we're providing lots of plugins. Maybe I'll start with this. Vault open source project. I guess that most of our viewers are familiar with that. So Vault open source project has huge community, very good community of contributors that are creating plugins and connectors to multiple types of platforms. So we have developed an API compatibility with the Vault open source project. So it means that in order to work with us, you can basically download whatever plugin that you're finding out there from the open source community, and you can work directly with us. So boom, you suddenly have all of those platforms that are natively supported to begin with. On top of that, there are SDKs in multiple languages, command line interfaces, and obviously RESTful API. So whatever you're convenient with. And of course,
awesome.
web user interface, and we have a browser add-on for human access, because although everything today needs to be API driven, guys, eventually we're working with people. So it needs to be colorful, and it needs to be with great user experience.
So you can use so if you're already hooked in with Vault, you can already use the technology in the sense that you're kind of plugging into what you're already hooked into with AKEYLESS. So if you're already like set up for Vault, then you can build on top of that to use Vault, or I'm sorry, AKEYLESS.
Basically, yes, because imagine that you have a Vault open source for some usage of yours, and then it starts growing and scaling, and then you find yourself dealing with multi-region replications and multi-environments, and and leader elections and all kind of things that sometimes we like that. That's fine, but we find that lots of enterprises don't want to mess with that. And this is where we come in the picture, and we're saying, guys, either have it with our on-prem package, which is a soft appliance that is very easy to work with, or work as a service where you don't need to mess with the infrastructure whatsoever. And you can basically take our gateway API, which is a stateless Docker container, work with it, and keep your current endpoints with the Vault open source that you've been using. And the switch is very easy. So yes, this is the target. Not necessarily with all, right? Despite the fact that Vault OSS is widely known, most of the organizations that we work with, they did not implement that yet. So sometimes some have it and some don't have it. So it's a large market.
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the businesses that I'm familiar with that are similar to the one I work for, GitHub, has basically some of our own modifications to Vault, right? So it's Vault, but it's got like some heavy modifications, I would say, but which is, again, that's why I think that there needs to be something that's easy, that's distributed. And again, one of the things that I really liked was the whole zero trust. Sorry, better way to say it, zero trust sort of model. Seth, before I ask the next question, you looked very pensive, like you're going to ask a question. So I want to make sure I don't like.
No, I was wondering. So we've talked about Vault, and how AKEYLESS compares to that. like I also wondered, like that's more of kind of the secret management, API to API or computer to computer, the SSH access and like the human element that you keep talking about, Oded, right? How does that necessarily function? Is that one of those like you sign into AKEYLESS first, or is it integrated with SSO, like with your local system? And
the second, yes.
Okay.
Our goal is to save a lot of time for the infrastructure and security guys, for DevOps guys, right? Yeah. And on the other hand, to change as little as we can, not to change the ways that people tend to work. So if the organization is already working with identity provider, that's a plus. We don't want to be identity provider. We do have a solution for the secret zero problem with universal identity. I can talk about that later. But in terms of humans, of course, we don't want to change the way that you used to work. So using any identity provider that you have, imagine that you're running your OpenSSH, your native supported SSH that you're working, but without using SSH keys. And whenever you're firing an SSH request, then what you have is basically an identity provider request to authenticate the screen that you are already familiar with. And behind the scene, we are creating an SSH certificate. Now that SSH certificate is created for a short-lived period of time. And it is being provided to and created to the client side, and then provided to the target host. Now, the only configuration that needs to be done on the target host is the trusted
trusted certificates. Yep.
That's a great solution. No agents whatsoever. Okay. So, and you know what you've mentioned, the differentiators between us and the Vault OSS. So Vault OSS is able to create SSH certificates, to issue SSH certificates, but they've never wrapped it into a one complete solution of SSO with SSH or privileged access management for Linux servers or for SSH access. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's just an example where we said, okay, there are capabilities of managing the secret, but we want to go even deeper. We want to manage the secret through its whole life cycle when it is being used. So for that sense, we are also leveraging our ability to act as a certificate authority and provide certificates also for kubectl. Kubectl by default is using short, long-lived TLS certificates. So the same solution as for SSH, as I've just mentioned, with identity provider and short-lived certificates for a certain session, again works well for kubectl access. And this is where we provide a 360-degree solution for privileged access and secrets management for Kubernetes. Because it's not just that we're managing the secrets for Kubernetes cluster by integrating into the Kubernetes secrets mechanism, okay, rather than also managing the access to the kubectl management. Okay, so we're being able to either the secrets that are being used by Kubernetes and also the secrets that are being used in order to manage the Kubernetes clusters. That's just an example. We do that for other places also.
Yeah. I mean, I would assume if you've worked that out, then you're also doing that for things like AWS keys, like access, like the AWS command line, or Google or Google Cloud, GCP, right?
Exactly. And when you mention those, this is where a great, and that's a very interesting trend that's happening in the last few years, very recent, that is called just-in-time access. Yeah. I guess that some of our viewers are familiar with dynamic secrets, dynamic secret approach. But the father of it, the grandfather of dynamic secret, is basically coming from privileged access management world and identity management. This is why, for me, it's a great area. I like that. I can see, the whole development of the whole market, how it changes. But so just-in-time access was invented a few years ago, and the goal of it is basically to go to the place where you have zero standing permissions within your environment.
Yep.
So imagine that you have a database, for instance, that is has lots of users within the users tables, or Linux server with lots of public keys for SSH. So those are like lots of credentials that most of the time, most of it are not being used. Problems with compliance and audit and those kind of stuff. And when someone leaves the team, no one really knows what kind of credentials we can delete. And we find a lot of places where people are leaving the organization that they're working with SSH keys that are still valid. And you all know that hassle. So, so basically, when you combine all of that, you can say, we want to work in a world where there are no standing credentials, there are no standing permissions whatsoever. And everyone, to include human identities and also machine identities, they are all getting on-demand, just-in-time access whenever they need to. Okay, so imagine if a user or machine wishes to access a certain database or an AWS service or Linux server, whenever they wish to access, they are asking AKEYLESS, please give us short-lived, short-timed credentials, access, certificate, whatever, in order to access that machine. And this is where AKEYLESS takes place and provide those temporary credentials. So eventually, not machines and not humans are working with static credentials for them. So either, although you are very powerful DevOps guy, in the target host, in the endpoints, you basically don't have any credentials whatsoever, right? No public keys on Linux servers, you don't have account on SQL servers, and so on and so forth, rather than having those credentials created on the fly only when you need it, and they are automatically deleted.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a fan of the just-in-time access, right? Like, and it feels like the solution that you guys have come up with is a very elegant way of, like, we always talk about that layered security approach, right, from applications, and that authentication and authorization is like more and more. That's where we find all of the problems with instances.
Yeah, a lot of the problems for sure.
Yeah. And so like having the ability to basically turn off access when it's not needed is a huge plus, right? Like that's all that I see from an application perspective, because it takes me away. I've always said, like, I'd much rather, the amount of like login forms and user databases that I've created in my career is ridiculous, right? Like, it's like I shouldn't have to create the same thing over and over and reinvent the wheel. And we're getting better at that with identity, like the IDPs. But this just takes it one step further, because it's not just IDP, it's also IDP, and then you only have access when you need it, so that those credentials don't sit around. Right?
Yeah, what you're now saying, it's wonderful. And I'll tell you why. You know, one of our great aha moments when we talk with customers is that we're doing the following. Let's say we're demonstrating a lot with Okta. Obviously, it's a very known and famous solution. So we're showing them. We're talking with DevOps guys, and we're telling them, okay, how much time you currently invest with organizing permissions for everyone, right? Like someone is asking from you, I need access to that Linux server. I need access to that resource. I need permissions with my Chef, with my Jenkins, with my Kubernetes cluster. How do I do that? And please provide permissions. And they are wasting a lot of time on that. And that's a great headache. And we want to help them. So the big aha moment is when we're saying, you see that group of Okta? When you will add a certain identity to that group, or if you want a user within your Active Directory, okay, that's Active Directory group. It doesn't matter. But when you'll do that, because we are looking on that group, we're not synchronizing it. It is not provisioned to us or something. We're just monitoring that group. Just by doing that, that particular user or machine will automatically gain the permission to ask for access. So the next time that individual identity would ask to enter a Linux server for a certain IP, the backstage would make sure that they have the permission to do so, and then automatically provide short-lived certificate / credentials to database, etc., etc. But eventually, that's it. So you don't need to do much more than just organizing your users as you are convenient with, which is with organizational groups, teams groups, applications groups, and things like this. All the rest is being done by AKEYLESS, both for human identities and both for machines.
Yeah, the just-in-time access. I mean, if we go back to the earlier conversation that we had, right, about identity and access management solutions, we were talking about the provisioning process, and that's realistically what you've done away with, because it's auto provisioning based on a role, right? It's role-based access, auto provision when you ask for it. If you're not in the right group, you're going to get booted, obviously. So your manager has to put you in the right group. But other than that, it's like I was saying, it's an elegant way of handling, handling identity.
I'll tell you this: God bless the subclaims of Zaman.
Yeah.
Okay, that's basically it. That's basically it. There are a lot of different ways and alternatives, but basically, when you already have a token coming up from identity provider, and by the way, I'm keep talking about identity providers for humans, but the same exact way we're working with Azure Identity and AWS Assumed Roles and GCP CIAM and so on. The same action. It's very similar. This is JWT and that's other things, but you get the concept. So because you're getting a token of an external identity provider, you can say, okay, if that token is within that conditions, then what does it mean in terms of permissions, dynamic permissions within the great bucket of secrets, certificates, encryption keys, signing keys, API keys, SSH certificates, and so on and so forth. So that's the beauty of generalizing that problem of secrets.
Yeah, because the auto stuff is where the power really shows itself for sure.
Man, I gotta say, it's really sorry, just real quick. I just have to say this is really refreshing to see like a CEO of a company getting this technical and like in the product. I love it. It's amazing. You don't see this very often, so I'm just like sitting back like this is awesome.
Yeah,
so. I'll take that as a compliment. Thank you.
Big compliment.
Some people won't think that's a compliment. I'll take that.
It's very much intended to be a compliment.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sorry,
great,
Seth,
great.
Before I interrupted.
You're fine. The other question that I had then in that case, I mean, you're integrating with AWS, you're integrating with GCP, but maybe for some of the listeners, you can explain, like, just give us a rundown of the differences between what AKEYLESS provides as opposed to using something like Secrets Manager or Certificate Manager out of AWS.
Great. So there are two families of current solutions today. One provided by the cloud service providers as a service, Secret Manager, Certificate Manager, Parameter Store, Key Vault by Azure, and so on and so forth. The other family is the self-deployed solutions, right? OSS solutions, other big names in the industry. That requires you to have a complex IT project, basically. So let's talk about the cloud service providers. So basically, those are walled garden approach designed products, right? AWS, and that's totally legit, they are thinking about their own environments. When you are, organizations are hybrid. And if you wish to work with your AWS KMS, AWS Secret Manager within your third-party tools, which are our own DevOps tools, right? It's not natively connected. Okay, if you want to synchronize the secrets to all of your tools, some of them have maybe plugins that someone had, but are not widely used. But so they are not pluggable in a very good way to DevOps tools. They're not pluggable very good into the on-prem or legacy environment, okay, or the private cloud. How do you interact within a service that is, or database, or whatever that you're having within your legacy on-prem private cloud environment to a resource that is on public cloud? You don't have a mutual IAM to do so, okay? Okay, so that's basically it. So it's all about the walled garden approach that creates a lot of hassle in terms of operation and a lot of architecture and designing some solutions. The other thing is about some of them are not replicating secrets and keys between regions. They have security concerns. To remind you, we're working with fragments. We don't have any problem to replicate fragments of keys between regions and to be available from within any region. So you don't need to replicate on your own secrets and keys, okay? So that's another thing. Some issues with, I know it might be surprising, but there are limits to the cloud service providers' usage in terms of key management and secrets management, 1500s per second, things like this. Some of them are more extendable than the others, but basically there are some limits. And that's, by the way, sometimes because they have hardware behind their software. They have hardware secured modules behind their software. We're a completely software solution, and we're FIPS 140-2 certified. And that's because of our technology. So everything starts from our technology that enables us to do more and more things that the cloud service providers cannot do. And eventually, security, which is you don't want to necessarily share encryption keys with the cloud service providers because you are basically prone to Cloud Act and there are large organizations, some European, some US, that are having concerns about federal authorities that can have their hands on their encryption keys. And again, with our solution, we're agnostic to that. It's okay. We can have a warrant from a federal authority. We can provide fragments, but we can never provide all of the key because we don't have it.
Mm-hmm. Hitting those limits in production is fun.
Yeah. We have heard that from large customers that we were talking with, and well, actually, we were surprised on our own. We were surprised that there are those kind of limits. But you know what? You can understand that. For us, secrets and keys, this is our business. So we must be highly scalable, and we must have an infinite ending and whatever resources that the customers are asking, and to have some local caches, some local cache solutions, local proxies that we can have. We think about those problems of interconnecting environments. Okay, we think about how to do that very easy to work in a hybrid and multi-cloud environment. Okay. Now, for a cloud service provider, and I don't blame them, by the way, I have a lot of respect to those guys. They're doing a great job. But in terms of, what makes them busy, okay, maybe is less about interconnecting with other cloud providers, okay, the hybrid. Sure. They're saying that they are, but, we're a startup, we can move much faster. And I'm talking with a lot of modesty, that's the reality.
Yeah,
I hope you got
about like vendor lock-in and then like lift and shift, but yes, sorry, I think I lagged out.
I said I hope you got answers to the question.
Totally did.
Great.
And I mean that's just what I wanted to clarify, because we do have a lot of people. The majority of what we see is definitely AWS. That's the 500-pound gorilla right now, is everybody's in AWS, but there are some in GCP and in Vault. But I think the most interesting, the one that I run into the most, is what you called out as far as private cloud to public cloud, right? Because most of the large organizations and even small organizations have some sort of an internal network of computers that they use or servers that they use that are not integrated with AWS IAM and with secrets manager and everything else that is in the public cloud. And so they're having to go to something like OSS Vault or a different solution to do the same thing. Or in most cases, they're just not doing anything and it's all, static, right? Especially if they've been around for any period of time.
When you say private cloud, can you clarify that real quick? Private cloud versus public cloud, just for anybody who may not know, including myself, what you mean by that?
When we say private, basically it's either your own infrastructure, okay, and your own Kubernetes clusters on top of it. It's not managed Kubernetes, okay? There's virtual private cloud on top of public clouds, right? AWS, GCP, and so on. Private cloud is basically, for, maybe the most easy way to explain it, think about air-gapped networks. They want to have their own Kubernetes, OpenShift, Dockerized environments, right? They are entitled to do that, although they are air-gapped, okay? So they are entitled to go to the future, and we love that, and we encourage that. So this is where they are building their own private cloud. Okay.
I see.
That's basically how it works. And this is why I'm mentioning that. So when you're talking with that private cloud, so it's not an air gap solution, but it's let's say a bank that already invested with their own infrastructure. So they're saying we're moving to containerized environment, we're moving to Kubernetes, to OpenShift, and so on. And we want to communicate with our other environments. And which brings me to another interesting point with how do you authenticate? Okay, how do you authenticate within a private cloud or any legacy environment where you don't have identity and access management, in particular to machines? Okay, so back to stage one, you need to hold an STS token, or you need to hold an AWS identities or Azure, whatever static credentials, API key, right, within your internal environment or your whatever legacy that you wish, in order to interconnect to an external resources, which brings us to the beginning. Again, I'm having a secret within my code, within my CI/CD pipeline, okay? And I am having it inside in order to communicate with the external world. So how do I do that? There are no identities. This is where we provide a keyless universal identity exactly to solve that. I won't get right now into too much details because it's part of our IP. How do we do that?
For sure.
Basically, we provide an identity to a machine that doesn't have an identity, and that particular identity is not a secret. Okay, I know it sounds like again something that I'm a lot of contradictions today, but this is part of the magic that we do, right? Otherwise, it was not interesting. But so this is what we do. We provide an identity that, in case it is being stolen, we recognize that, and we are identifying that, and we are having some event go to the SIEM/SOC operation, and this is where we provide machine identities. So for an SDK that is running within your legacy environment or your on-prem environment, or whatever CI/CD process within Jenkins, okay, suddenly they have an identity that they can access the secret management system in order to fetch other secrets without compromising the secret zero. Okay, that's basically how it works.
Awesome. Seth, we're hitting about an hour. So I was wondering if you wanted to start, because it's after 2,000 hours over there in Tel Aviv. By the way, you missed it. I got a really great shot of Oded turned the camera and I was able to see like Tel Aviv, like the, yeah.
Oh, sweet. Yes.
I hope you can see that. I don't know. It's better because now, you know what? I'll turn off the lights here, and you'll be able to see the view that we have.
It's beautiful.
So
yeah. I was telling them how we brought the family out. The family's out there.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Looks familiar.
It does. It looks very familiar. And that was just, it was just over a year ago at this point, right? That we were there. It was awesome.
A better year.
A better year. Wasn't 2020.
But
I hope you come back. Come back soon. I hope that COVID-19 will be behind us. And
once it is, we'll start traveling again. I'm sure we'll be able to connect at some conference somewhere in the world, right?
Just happy to travel anywhere at this point.
Just going to the store is a trip at this point. Yeah.
Feel free to just anytime to just hop on a Zoom call, and I'll show you around Tel Aviv whenever you are.
Yeah, there you go.
I'm sure you've got nothing better to do than that.
Oh, I love Friends. I love Friends better than most.
Yeah.
Most invited.
We have been going for about an hour. We want to be cognizant of your time, Oded, as well as we're all busy still, even though everybody is in quarantine. What is the best way for people to interact with you online? Right, to just find you at AKEYLESS.io or Twitter.
AKEYLESS.io, as you can see right now on the screen. We're on Slack also. You'll find it on our pages. You can just go ahead and sign up. It's SaaS, and we have also on-prem, but it's SaaS and free package that you can start using and playing with it. We have a support within using Slack or emails if you wish. So whatever you're convenient with, feel free. AKEYLESS.io. This is the first place to go, and we can hop on a call. Whatever someone is interested, we're very welcome.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and I would encourage people to to reach out. I mean, obviously, it's a problem. I know even like the projects that I work on, right, open source and otherwise. It's one of the things that we always end up fighting with, right? We're deploying something to AWS, and then it's even a different cloud provider, and we start to think about, okay, secrets in dev, QA, prod, right? Like all the different environments, and it's not necessarily an easy problem to solve without a solution in place. So, yeah,
Exactly.
We'll push people your direction, and we'll keep the discussion going, because it feels like you've got a good foundation, and you're moving into spaces that are crucial to security and AppSec in general. So,
thank you very much, guys, for this opportunity. It has been a very interesting talk, and we're privileged to be in your show. And I hope to see you live here in Tel Aviv. Mostly welcome to grab a coffee and a beer next time you're around.
Sweet.
Well, I would say it's our privilege. You gave us your time. It's after 8:00 p.m. your time, and we're very appreciative of joining the call.
The day is just starting. Are you kidding? It's a startup. Come on.
Yeah. Well, plus I've saw the nightlife down there in Tel Aviv. It's late night. It's a late night lifestyle. Love it.
Yeah,
it's awesome.
Unfortunately, not right now. Some of the restaurants are off, but we tend to keep things open as much as we can, and to try and to keep the normal life as much as we can. And I hope, and I guess that you all hope that the entire world will be off with that COVID-19, and then we'll go back to the routine life that we all miss.
Yes.
Totally ready.
We all miss. Yeah, we're all ready for that.
No more work from home for me, please.
Cool. Well, thanks again. I appreciate it. There is one last thing I wanted to make sure that I mentioned, because I forgot to mention at the beginning of the show. I think it was not this last weekend, the weekend before we did this. I posted a link here, so you'll, if you're watching on YouTube, you'll have if you're not watching on YouTube, just go to the YouTube link for this episode, and you'll see another YouTube link. But yeah, it's the DevSlop code review we gave. Not last weekend, but the weekend before. So just want to make sure I mentioned that. So because we did that, free training, and then we skipped last week, so we didn't mention it. That it was out there because we didn't have a show last week. So
true.
Anyway.
Yep. Yeah. So
cool. Anything else anyone else wants to
mention? No, I don't think so. Yeah, the DevSlop stuff was good. Please follow us on Twitter, join our Slack channel as well. If you want to keep the discussion going with Oded and AKEYLESS, let us know, or other options. What's out there? We'd love to talk through it. But we appreciate everyone's time and hope to see everybody online. We'll be back next week.
Thank you all very much. Live long and prosper.
Yes, there we go. Bye-bye. Live long and prosper. Bye-bye.
Thanks.